Today on Soul Work for Moms. What does home mean to you? That's what I asked Haven Magazine founder and editor-in-chief Liz Bell Young. Liz is a mom living in Cincinnati, Ohio. She attended the School of Art Institute in Chicago and earned a master's in fiction writing from the University of Cincinnati. She's also written a beautiful memoir, In the Wide Country of Love, which highlights the 4 years she lived in Italy while her husband was in the military. Liz is an incredibly grounded, warm, and kind woman who has thought a lot about this thing called home. Hear her interview right after this. I'm Michelle Duncan-Wilson, and last year I created a workshop for moms to get together and work through some of the things they were struggling with. The feedback from the workshop was great, but the thing I heard over and over again from the mothers was that they loved hearing all the other women who shared their struggles and strengths in mothering. I wanted to create an outlet for more of that, and the result is this podcast. Join me as I interview a different mother every week. You can listen in as women from all different backgrounds and stages in life share their experiences in motherhood. You'll also hear from expert guests who share their ideas on how to take the hard parts of mothering and use them to grow personally and spiritually. I call it Soul Work for Moms, Evolution Through Mothering. Welcome to the show. Liz, thank you so much for being on Soul Work for Moms.
You're welcome.
I'd love to get started with you sharing your journey of becoming a mother, and I'd love to hear, did you always know that you wanted to be a mom, or was it a difficult decision for you?
Okay, I love that question because it's one I've thought about and care a lot about. You know, I actually remember a really specific moment when I realized how much I really actually desperately longed to be a mom. Of course, I thought about it a lot, you know, growing up, as I'm sure a lot of young girls do. But when I was in art school in a grad program, and this was for creative writing. And we were all, sort of a workshop style. And so a group of us sitting around the table with a professor, and the professor asked us, to this table of mostly writers, some fine artists and installation creators, what is it that you want to be when you grow up? It was sort of like a tongue in cheek, but it was, there was a lot of poignancy to her question. And we started going around the table, and I remember thinking as it got closer to me, I have no idea what I'm going to say. I sort of felt lost with the question. Now, I knew I wanted to be a writer. That's why I was in school. I had done social work before. I sort of had, toggled back and forth different ideas of like what I wanted to be when I grew up. But at that point, I'm like, I want to be a novelist or a short story writer, or that sort of thing. And then it came to my time to answer, and it's like my mouth opened up, and I can't believe, and I just said, I just want to be a mom. And I thought, like, I'm just going to pass out right now. Like, it hit me as if that was what I'd always been created to be. And I actually articulated that and said that to a room of people who normally I would have just said, a novelist. And it was a really emotional moment for me. Now, I didn't become a mom right away. That was actually a few years later after that. But I started to sort of grasp the weight of that and how much it was a longing for me.
What did childhood look like for you?
So I grew up with 3 sisters and my parents, but we were all in the same home together. And my mom was an artist and community activist, a really incredible role model of someone who could both, just kind of straddling that like the artistic sense with the practicalities of everyday life. And my dad was a chemical engineer. He was running his own business. And then my 3 sisters, and we were all very close and depended a lot on each other for those friendships. And so it was a very solid foundation for me. And so it was a good childhood for sure. I was also, I had my shyness, I have a bit of an introvert side. And so I would spend hours reading or hours, in the backwoods, building little homes actually is what I used to do. And I spent a lot of time in solitude out of choice. And then a lot of time, with my family and back to the family dinner. And it was sort of like I needed both very much. I needed to be alone. And I also really, really needed my family.
The name of your magazine that you've created is Haven. What does that word mean to you, and where did the inspiration for creating a print magazine come from?
So the name of it came before the publication itself. I had been doing freelance work for a while, and then also just professionally, I was working as a writer and experience designer. And so, but I was doing this freelance work on the side, and I felt like I needed something to house it all together. I sort of felt like, now this is when I had, two little ones at the time, two little boys. And, I knew the work that I was doing was really good. I also knew I needed to stay. I like a lot of things happening creatively. And so I like to push in a lot of directions, but I also needed like an umbrella for that. And for whatever reason, I think I was just driving one day and the idea of Haven, just the word of it actually is what struck me. And I thought, well, that's the name of whatever this thing will become. And why, I guess, for that is because I care a lot about people and bringing people to places, whether that's emotionally or relationally, physically, that are safe, that are kind and gentle, and that I guess I just want everybody to have a place that they belong. And so Haven to me feels like the representation of that, even if sort of in an abstract way, or just a way to explore. And then I suppose it came, the print. I love print. I love paper. I love words on paper. And I also love, in art school, I kind of worked with this interdisciplinary approach. So it's not writing alone. It's not acting alone. Like blending all of the different mediums is really appealing to me. And so doing a publication is one way to achieve that. And so I don't know, I guess I just thought, let's try it.
Volume 2 has just been released, and I have to say that both volumes are incredibly beautiful, and it's a really beautiful project.
Thank you.
So what does home look like for your family right now?
So it is changing, as I think it's probably always meant to. You have to sort of pivot as you go. But I think that this past year has been really big for our family of 5. And it's actually, so I'm still really close to those sisters and all of their children. So really there's, 25 of us who are all interacting. It's a circus, and it's a sweet circus, but it's, there's a lot happening at all times. So home right now physically, because I think that filters or falls over into the other parts of it. But we picked up pretty quickly and left a house that we had spent a lot of time just getting the aesthetic right, this wasn't like a fancy house, but it turned into what felt like, it works for Haven. It works for, people loved coming there. It was pretty beautiful. It was like a mid-century modern. It had a lot of things that we felt good about and had spent years to create. And we realized that my husband was probably, it was easy for him to leave. He wasn't terribly attached to it. But we decided to go and move out to the suburbs, which was actually like a source of pride for me. I realized I have issues with this, and why do I care? But we wanted to live by my sisters, and it felt really important to raise our kids together, and really important to have each other, just like in the day to day, and almost like only how neighbors can do, because it's so hard as a young mom to even get into the car as a family, as anybody listening probably knows and experiences every day. So we moved next door to one sister, across the street from the other, and down the street from my parents and the other sister. So home looks like a lot of little children and open doors that are open and closed every day, a lot of times. And we have learned how to let go of a lot of control. We had even though we had 3 little kids, we had a pretty clean house, and it was very put together. Well, you kind of have to let go of a lot of that stuff when, crowds of children are coming through your house.
How does mothering specifically fit into what you just described in that picture of home?
I have realized, and this is all very fresh, that I think that at different points in my mothering, I have felt called to different amounts of time or to being in certain places. I have felt that if I'm not pretty like intimately tending to my family right now, and, you know, for whatever reason, because I think you can work full time and and that can totally work for you. But for me, it was not going to work. And I knew that. So, you know, but which is a hard thing to reconcile. Like I actually really love to work. And so, but I also really love my family and love them more. And so I think it's just been it was this really like a couple months of assessing and having like really open, you know, conversations with my husband. Why this? Why this? Or why do I feel, you know, guilty here? Is that the right kind of, you know, is that the kind of guilt that, you know, because you need to change a direction, or is that a guilt that you can let go of? You know, those kind of conversations.
That's perfect to hear you say that, because when I announced that you were going to be interviewed today for the podcast, the number one question that I got from mothers who knew your work is, how does she do so much while raising her children? And I think a lot of women that know you via social media, they see these beautiful projects that you're putting together, and they see the beautiful home, and they see the 3 children. And I think it's really important for moms to hear that you also struggle with where you're putting your intention and where you're putting your time, because it's easy, especially today with Pinterest and Instagram and Facebook, to think, what am I doing wrong that all of these other women have somehow figured out?
Oh, I know. I feel the same way. Yeah. And so I'm very happy to have the chance to say, like, I'm not saying like it's a facade or anything like that. What I'm saying is like, there is true struggle there as well for me. And I mean, when my third was, I had like this really amazing maternity leave. Like I just felt like, you know, it was the first time I took a break in a long time, because you're at home with the baby and the other 2 were in school for a little bit. But maybe when she was about 6 months old, I mean, I didn't know what was happening. I thought I was just going to like lose it all. I don't know if it was postpartum depression. I don't know, like there was anxiety around moving, like just physically moving, but it was a really, really hard time. And that's, you know, that's when I was in the midst of this conversations, like what is like my purpose? What really matters? Tons of people create beautiful stuff every day. Like, do I have to try to be a part of that? And I started to say no a lot to that, which is probably, maybe it wasn't even visible from the outside or from Instagram or whatever. But I think that I was not going to be at peace if I kept pushing really hard. And physically, I was getting really exhausted. So, you know, obviously with like, a little baby, but then I would work super late at night and then get up at 5 a.m. to finish what I couldn't finish late at night. And that was like, it was not good for my body. And it was just hard to keep that up. So I think if someone like followed me around, like they would sort of laugh a little bit with me, not because I'm doing so much, but because I bump into walls. And, you know, we were at Dunkin' Donuts this morning because there was nothing in our house to eat for breakfast. And I say I'm tending to my family, but like I haven't been to the grocery store in a long time. So
it's really healing to hear that you were in Dunkin' Donuts this morning.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Because when I take my kids to Dunkin' Donuts, I think, oh, I'm a bad mom. What am I doing letting them eat this stuff? Why am I so hard on myself?
I don't know. And, you know, like I've also noticed too, like there's a lot of like mom confessional stuff happening, which I'm thrilled with. I think like the watch out in that for me is that like I also don't need to like attach my identity to like, all we could do was, you know, get the kids in the car and get like, you know, our life is a total wreck. Like I also feel like there's kind of, do you know what I'm saying in that? Yeah, there's almost a pressure to be like so self-deprecating and going the other extreme. And it's fine. Like I'm so happy to admit I was at Dunkin' Donuts, like, but I'm admitting it because it's freeing. And I don't think it's the cool thing to do And I have to like be evaluating that in my head. Like, why am I doing what I'm doing or saying what I'm saying? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, the interview is not over yet, but Liz has brought up some great areas that you can think about for your own personal growth. Like, did you always know that you wanted to be a mom? How does that affect your experience of motherhood? Or what does home mean to you? Does social media ever cause you to question your abilities? If you'd like to dive deeper into these topics, I've created something for you, and it's free. Each week in the episode show notes, you'll find a new soul worksheet specific to that week's interview. On the sheet, you'll find journaling questions pulled from topics discussed on the show, along with a soul work action step for the week. There's definitely incredible value to be gained just from listening to the show, but if you'd like a way to make it even more personal and record your thoughts along the way, the soul worksheet is for you, and like I said, it's free. For today's worksheet, go to soulworkformoms.com/LizBellYoung. If you get to the site and can't remember that, you can also find it by clicking on podcast, then finding today's episode. Now let's get back to the show. You lived in Italy for 4 years, and you wrote about that in your book, In the Wide Country of Love. Looking back, is there anything that stuck out to you now that you're a mom about maybe how mothering or home was different in that culture versus here?
Oh, I have never thought about that specifically. So that's an interesting, yes, it probably did have a bearing on things. And when we were there, I lived, it was just my husband and I, and we lived in a house that had multiple floors. And, it wasn't like under the Tuscan sun, like crazy romantic farmhouse, but it was still pretty idyllic in ways. And we lived on the main floor of this house. Our landlords, they were an older couple, lived on the floor above us. And then their daughter and her son, she was a single mom, she lived on the top floor of the house. And in that neighborhood, it was very, it was just different, I guess. It's not really like the neighborhoods, unless like some people luck out and they have great neighborhoods. I've heard about these places in Cincinnati, but, or in other states, but like where people actually interact and engage with each other instead of just like go into your house, close your door and, that's it.
Yeah.
And I think like in Italy, there was a lot more interaction and, just it's the man, bringing grappa down, and knocking on the front door and feeling totally comfortable coming into your house, or just like a lot of walking and actual like physical interaction, which was really neat about that. So I'm glad you asked, and I thought about that again.
Who do you go to when you have questions about parenting?
My mom. I have this woman, Sybil Towner, has been in my life since I was 4, 5, 6. And I would call her, certainly a mentor. I have, it's like those wise people. I think it's always like, if you can find one, hang on to them. She has been an anchor for me as well as another woman and in friends. And I don't mean that like in a light way. I think I've transitioned from like, it's kind of hard to make really good friends, isn't it? Like in relationships that matter and that you're vulnerable in. And so I feel like, that took sort of years to come out of me, going from like whatever college sororities, more like facade like relationships and then getting to places of depth. So I go to those people. I'm very one-on-one. I don't read any blogs. Not that they're bad. It's just like, for me, it's like conversation in person. And that's where I sort of that's where I get grounded. And that's where I, rely on other women and other moms to keep me centered and to hopefully help keep them centered.
What's been the biggest joy of motherhood for you so far?
Goodness. Having a third child has been incredible for us. And I might even say it's that, like, not her she's an 8, like I love her, but like, equally all of them. They all have their, what am I saying? They all have their idiosyncrasies. You prefer different children at different times, of course. But like, I think that it's like when you kind of get a little bit of a sense that like you're not finished or there's something that's like incomplete a little bit. And for us, like, I think a lot of that was with our daughter, Marin. Like we wanted her as a part of our family. And so when she came, that has just brought like really sweet joy. Yeah, I'm happy about that.
What's something that you have in the past or currently struggle with as a mother?
How to sum that up? Like I was, I guess, saying before, like I think that all of this, like, it's a lot of identity work, really, isn't it? Like, what am I striving too hard for? And where am I just attempting to like, perform or be something for other people that I'm not? That's probably like my biggest thing, is just like learning how, and this is like, I don't know, every 15 minutes I could be thinking about this, but like how to be more and more transparent and honest, because to me, like that has been like the source of freeing and unlocking like everything good that is happening is just like being honest, and okay with yourself.
What do you hope your children remember most about their childhood?
So I hope that they feel so solid in who they are, and that we and that my extended family, that we all completely accept them, love them, they have a place with us. If they have that level of confidence and, foundation, I think that's it.
And if there was one thing that you wanted all mothers to know, what would it be?
Grace. Grace. I think that if you believe and are willing to step into the fact that like you can make changes now. You can entirely change the course of something if you want to. I've been afraid at different times of like, well, I'm set now, or I made that mistake. There is no way out of it. I don't believe that anymore. So I think that if we can, as moms, be willing to extend ourselves the grace to reroute, to pivot, to make changes, to be okay with the here and now, as even when it's ugly. I think there's health in that, and there's truth in that, not in what I'm saying, but in the grace piece. And I've found it, and I would just hope for other moms that they would experience the same.
Wise words of wisdom from Liz Bell Young end this week's episode and brings us to this week's soul work action step. Define an area in your life that you are feeling called and ready to accept grace into, an area that you may have felt was impossible to change. This week's step isn't asking you to do anything else other than hear the call and say to yourself, I choose to allow grace into this area of my life so that it may be changed. You can find links to Liz, her beautiful magazine Haven, and more on the show notes page at soulworkformoms.com/Liz Bell Young. That's where you'll also find the soul worksheet I mentioned earlier, and that's where we'll be talking about what we took from Liz and what she shared on the show today. Thanks so much for listening to the first episode of the Soul Work for Moms podcast. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram under the same name, Soul Work for Moms. And I'll end today by reminding you that you matter. We need your courage, and we need your strength. When you push through your vulnerabilities and heal your wounds through soul work, you heal the world. And that is evolution through mothering. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.